Hi everyone, we have Souris here with us today, who's recently been placed at McKinsey through his campus placements at VIT. He is here to share his interview experience with us today. So before we talk to him, let's look at the eligibility criteria. So the students belonging to CSE, ECM and IT with a CGPA of 7 or 70% in 10th and 12th and a minimum CGPA of 7 or 70% in the pursuing degree with no standing arrears were eligible. Now let's go ahead and talk to Saurish. Hi Saurish, so welcome to my channel and congratulations on your placement.
Thank you.
So would you like to introduce yourself first?
Sure. I am Souris and I am a fourth year student at VIT Vellore. I recently got placed at McKinsey and Company with an internship plus full-time offer.
Okay.
And I am a computer science student, computer science core, and I mostly like to work in distributed systems and back-end architecture related stuff. And I mostly work in the back-end related fields.
Okay.
And apart from this, I also have some experience with front-end, but that's not really my choice of work. I have been an intern, a 6 months intern from December 2021. For 6 months, I have been an intern at Urban Ladder, which is under Reliance Retail now. There also I was an intern as a back-end engineer.
Okay.
And for 2 months after that, I also was at Appointee, India. There also I interned as a summer intern as a back-end engineer. So as a back-end software development and engineer.
Okay.
So this is a brief of my work experience. And apart from this, I have a few hobbies, mostly in the music production space and playing musical instruments and all.
Okay.
So yeah, I think that's a brief introduction.
Okay, thanks. That's great. You can now tell us about your placement experience or interview experience, like how many rounds were there and what happened?
Sure. So a general trend here for companies is to have around 2 to 3 rounds of interviews. This trend was followed by almost every company that visited the campus, apart from maybe 2 or 3 exceptions that had their own ways of, maybe instead of 3 they had 2. So, and the biggest trend here was for full-time or internship plus full-time offers. They were usually conducting 2 to 3 interviews all throughout.
Okay.
Some companies that only came for an internship did only 1 or maximum 2 rounds of interview. So, for example, Amazon came and they only conducted 1 round of interview, but they were only hiring for internships.
Okay.
So usually companies would do up to 3 rounds of interviews for rolling out internship plus full-time offers. So this is the general trend. This was also followed by McKinsey.
Okay.
Before the interview, there would be a coding round usually. So most companies would have an online assessment round. This online assessment round would either be just some companies would have aptitude and some computer science questions or maybe questions related to the job description. And in addition, it was very likely that you would be getting some coding questions, 2 or 3 coding questions. The test duration could vary from maybe 1.5 hours, 1 hour or 1.5 hours. That was the most frequent test duration we faced.
Okay.
McKinsey had a similar pattern. For McKinsey, they had an online coding round. The coding round was, the first coding round was simple enough. The questions were not too difficult. They were easy, medium kind of level as per lead code.
Okay.
There were, if I remember correctly, I think there were 2 questions or 3 questions. And the time was standard, 1.5 hours or 1 hour something.
Okay.
So after this coding round, they came out with a shortlist. The next round was a code pair round.
Okay.
So which I found unique in case of McKinsey. The other companies did not have that. So I remember thinking that the shortlist is out and we are being called for the interview. But the next morning we go and they again sent us a link to code. But there was a twist in this round. Basically, people from McKinsey had come there. people working at McKinsey had come there, and what we had to do basically was given a question on HackerRank, pretty much like a coding round, but only one question.
Okay.
Given a question, you have to first read the question. You have to first ask one of the volunteers to come and validate your approach.
Okay.
You have to first explain them the question, what you mean, what the question means, what is your approach, and discuss with them the approach that you are going to solve.
Okay.
It's kind of like a pseudo interview plus solving a coding question. So you first discuss with them your approach, you explain the approach you're going to take. The person will usually tell you to write a pseudo code for the approach you're going to take, and then you validate with them the pseudo code that you're going to do, and then after that you are asked to implement it and pass the test cases on HackerRank.
Okay.
So once that is done, for me it was a fairly easy question. The question was actually a variant of the climbing staircase problem on LeetCode.
Okay.
It was a DP related question, one-dimensional DP related question. And if you have practiced DP, it's a fairly simple question. So you just had to explain it to them properly and implement it, pass the test cases, and it was done. So I was able to do it pretty quickly, and I exited the hall.
Okay.
After that, they asked us to stay nearby, because pretty soon they would come out with the interview shortlist. They came out with the interview shortlist around 2 hours later, I think.
Okay.
And they had created a WhatsApp group with the participants, and they rolled out the names who would be selected for the interview. Okay. So this code pairing round was taken in 3 batches. The first batch in the morning, and then another batch near the afternoon, and then another near the evening, kind of. So each of the batches, after finishing the code pair round, would be starting with their interviews.
Okay.
So now I was in batch 1 because my code pair round had happened in the morning. After that, they came up with the shortlist for the interview round. My interview got a little delayed because the number of panels from McKinsey were just, I think, 1 or 2 panels were there interviewing. Okay. So they did take time. Throughout the time, however, the McKinsey HR people, they relayed to us that the interviewers would be mostly focusing on your basic core concepts of computer science, starting from operating systems to networking, databases, very important subject, and some data structures and algorithms. So just regular stuff for fresher interviews. So they told us to keep on studying that and revise that, so that because for freshers there's not much more to ask. They usually be asking that itself. So they kept us in a room and just asked us to keep revising. They gave us a lunch break because the interviews were getting delayed. They told us that each interview could go on till about an hour. Okay. So because of that, and there were quite a number of candidates. So from batch 1, I remember around 18 candidates were selected from maybe around 50 or 60 people. Okay. Or maybe 60, not more than 70 people. So they selected around 18 people for the interview from batch 1 itself. From batch 2 and 18 more. So maybe around 24 to 30 people total got selected for the interviews. So my chance of interview actually came way later. I had finished my code pair round at around 10:15 or 10:30 a.m. Okay. I was called for an interview around 6 o'clock. Oh. So, in between there were interviews ongoing, but maybe there was some mess up with the order. The batch 2 also came. Whatever happened, my interview started at around 6:15. Okay. And as they had told, the interview went on for around an hour. Okay. Something 45 minutes, 50 minutes kind. So now I'll come to the interviews. What happened in the interviews exactly? So I personally had 2 interviews. So the first interview was technical, as was the second interview. Okay. In the first interview, I was facing with a panel of 2 people. One of them being an experience of around 10 to 12 years in the field, and a software architect. So now So one very important thing, whenever you get shortlisted for these kind of interviews, it's very important to have multiple copies of your resume, because it would be difficult to just go to each interviewer and give the resume, and after the interview you have to take it back and go again to the other room, and this kind of stuff happens. So it's for people who are watching this video, just please make sure you have multiple copies of your resumes ready, preferably at least 3 to 4 copies ready, so that you don't have to ask your resume back from the interviewer. So anyways, the first round of the interview was the technical round, as was the second, like I mentioned. In the first round, now usually they would ask freshers about operating systems and networking, but in my case the interviewer was a system architect.
Okay.
So my whole interview, like about 85% of my interview was based on system design. So the majority part of it, like the first majority, at least first part of it, was majorly discussing what I did at Urban Ladder as a backend engineer.
Okay.
So there I had worked on architecting a system actually about distributed tracing. So that is what led to the discussion about system design majorly, because the interviewer found me capable enough of that discussion, and because I was working in that field even in my internship. So they started with just system design concepts. They did not go too hardcore, but they did pose like nice questions, and they asked why are you making this design decision and why not that. So we talked about what I did in the internship, the architecture that I created there for distributed tracing and all. And after that, he gave me a system design problem to design an e-commerce web application. So Urban Ladder being an e-commerce store, a furniture selling, online furniture store. So he asked me to design from scratch e-commerce web platform. So I designed that on paper, and we're speaking about all the design decisions, like why we should be using microservices, or why we should not be using monolith, or why. And so basically the concept was that you are a startup that you want to get up quickly as an e-commerce web platform, design the system. You are an architect, you need to design the system. So we talked about and discussed and why we should do this and why we should not do this, and how we should be using the microservices, which kind of technology we should be using for each of these services, what functionality should each microservice be performing, how would distributed transactions be handled, or how would failure be found in the system, how would you tolerate with the failure, how would you detect the failure, and how would you mitigate the failure by adding some other support points on that to mitigate the single point of failure, and about how you can design the database instead of having a shared database with all the microservices, you have a database per service pattern. So how do you handle distributed transactions? So all these kinds of stuff. And then the tech stack for each service, like which service handles what function. So for this function, which kind of database and which kind of tech stack would be comfortable and which tech stack would be suitable. So these kind of stuff were the core of the discussion. Then after that, he also tried to take me towards a multi-region setup. So he was like, okay, now you have started growing maybe as a startup, and now you need to go to another region. So this till now I was mostly showcasing and talking about system design. So at this point, knowledge about AWS also came in handy. About how AWS regions work, what are availability zones, and how you can have different availability zones and make them available in case one is not working. So all these kinds of concepts also came in handy. So there was no pressure from the interview side. He just let me flow till I was comfortable. So probably being a fresher, he did not stress me much on that. So this was the initial system design discussion. And after that, the interviewer asked me that, okay, what else, which else subject are you comfortable in? So having practiced lead code and all, I was like, okay, you can ask me data structures and algorithms. But the interviewer was like, DSA is maybe not his forte, so he wanted to do something else if possible. So we settled with object-oriented design. So the problem that he gave me was something like this, that suppose there are multiple cities you are maybe a store chain, and you have multiple stores at multiple cities.
Okay.
Now, at these stores, there are clerks. These clerks, every night, these clerks send you a sales report of whatever has happened throughout the day. And you are a manager sitting at maybe a central hub, who is getting all these reports from various cities, sales corners and shops. And you need to take all these reports every day. The reports sent to you last night, you need to take all these reports and you need to merge all the information in it and put it into a database.
Okay.
Now, you are getting bored of this and you want to automate this thing. So, what kind of class design and pattern would you follow?
Okay.
But there's a catch. The catch being that every shop here, a shop in every city, they are not very good at communicating with each other, and the protocols are not standardized.
Okay.
So some shops sends you the data as maybe a CSV file. Some other sends you as a PDF file. Some other sends you as an Excel file. So somebody sends you as a TXT file. There's no uniformity. But that is your job. You need to automate this. You need to take all that data and put it into the database in a structured manner.
Okay.
So given that the data structure, the data that you're receiving, the structure of the data that you're receiving, that is same. Only the format of the files and how they are stored is different. So given this situation, I was asked to design classes and interfaces of how I would go about implementing something like this in an object-oriented language or design pattern.
Right.
So I started explaining by talking about the interface that I would have. So the abstraction level, like if we have a database and we know that we are putting stuff in a fixed format into the database, like the interviewer said, the format is different, but the data structure is same. The fields that you're getting are same. So you're putting the same stuff essentially into the database.
Right.
So we make an interface that basically abstracts away the file type, and then we make an interface that abstracts away the parser. So maybe I have an file parser interface, and then I have a PDF parser implementation and all that stuff.
Right.
So we talked about this and how we can use these interfaces to call, and so there was some extended discussion. He asked me to create a human class diagram for that to make things clearer.
Okay.
And that was pretty much the end of the first interview.
Okay.
And so in the end of the interview, what I basically asked them, this is my principle, I would usually ask them if they would have any feedback for me as the interviewer, something that I might improve. System design is something that I really like. So seeing that he's a system architect, I asked him if, how I could improve my knowledge and anything that I should be improving on. So he did tell me a few things, although he was pretty happy. But the major point that he highlighted was that one should be able to be, that I was able to provide, which he liked, is that one should be able to provide the why of their design decisions.
Right.
People would usually provide how and what. Like you will show them the class pattern, you will show them the inheritance pattern and all. But when he asks you, why did you do this? Why did you create this interface? Why did you abstract away this interface and not this? You should be able to answer back that this is the exact reason I did it.
Right.
So no design decision of yours should be an arbitrary decision. If you are using Node.js for a microservice, you should have a sound reasoning behind it. That not just because I like Node.js, so I'm using Node.js.
Right.
That is not how it works, right? So you should have a sound reasoning beyond all the design decisions that you are taking, and why this and why not. You should be able to defend that decision. So this is something that he really liked.
Okay.
Apart from that, that I think that he mentioned that he really liked was that the way of explanation should be from ground up.
Right.
So suppose when I'm designing the classes, when I'm performing the object-oriented design, or when I'm performing the system design, I want to start from a basic system and evolve it to a better order, or basically perform the optimizations sequentially. So it's not performing that like I directly design a system that has queues, has this, has that.
Right.
So like I'm like, okay, let's have these. Then we need to solve this problem now, so let's have this.
Correct.
Now we need to solve this problem now, so let's do this. So like this sequential order of presenting the solution is something that I think he really liked.
Okay.
So yeah, this pretty much concluded my first interview. The second interview was also very similar. The second interview, in my second interview also, there was a cloud architect who with around 16 years of experience.
Oh, okay.
So with him also, it was a primarily system design based interview only. But in that, he tried to bring up more security related concepts as well.
Okay.
So, for example, just taking my e-commerce web application, he would ask me how you would also approach the authorization and authentication point of view, how you would, take that security context and propagate it through each request for the microservices. And maybe so if we have a distributed setting, tracing setup, it's easy to do that through HTTP REST endpoints. But what if we have a GraphQL endpoint? So discussion about this, like security with such kind of GraphQL endpoints, and if there are queues or Rabbit, maybe I'm using a message broker like RabbitMQ. Then how do I trace that? So these kinds of discussions took place. I did lack some knowledge in these areas, but the interview was hinting well enough to drive the discussion forward.
Right.
So this was pretty much the second interview. In this second interview also we talked about multi-region setups, and we also talked a little bit about hybrid cloud setups.
Okay.
So, but not too much in depth. So this was the I'm sorry for the noise outside, I think. But yeah. So this was the second round of interview.
Okay.
And these were the only 2 rounds of interviews I had. After that, there was a small chit chat with the HR about the offer they are extending me and whether I am willing to accept it or not. And that concluded the interview experience I had with McKinsey.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing your experience, and it was great. And do you have any suggestions specific to McKinsey or anything in general?
So McKinsey actually, since McKinsey is one of the biggest consulting firms,
right.
So if somebody wants to target McKinsey, I think if you do not know anything, then obviously it's best to revise your fundamentals of operating systems and networking and all.
Right.
But like you can see, I was not asked anything out of this because what they usually need is problem solvers. So if you have, because clients will approach them and they will be like, design a solution for us.
Correct.
So that problem solving ability or the problem solving mindset should be the strongest in order to, I think this is true for any interview actually,
right.
But this capability of solving problems is what they will usually look for.
Okay.
So even if you do not know operating systems or networking in depth, but you are good at designing good architectures and you know about the technologies and when to use which technologies, you don't need to be worried that, oh, I don't know operating systems, what will happen if they ask me?
Right.
It's fine. They will focus on your problem solving abilities more. So that is the only suggestion I think I can give regarding this. And other than that, I think it's usually just tough to clear the first initial online assessment round.
Right.
After that, for interview preparation, it's just communication skills, how you present the solution and how you present your knowledge. So if like in the beginning of the interview, they'll usually ask you, please introduce yourself. So what you talk about in that introduction usually will drive the rest of the interview.
Right.
So since I had said that I've worked in the back end and I'm good at systems, then they started with that.
Right.
So yeah, these are the things that I can emphasize upon for interviews, I guess. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much again for sharing your experience and for the suggestions. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.